Hello, and it's time for another edition of the King's Roundtable here on Turnbuckle Bros. Welcome, all you turnbucklers out there, to yet another edition, a special edition of Turnbuckle Bros. The Roundtable is back. The King's Roundtable. The King himself, Steve Mutzu, the Lime Ripper, here with us today. And of course, joining us again from California, Tyler Ensor. From New Jersey, David Avens. Obi Baud Kenobi, Chris Baud from Deadspin.com, coming to us from Las Vegas today. And with us today is the actual co-founder, co-creator of the site that we talk about on the show all the time, Diamond Mine Online at Magisports.com, Mr. Dayne. Myers. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, Dayne. Welcome to a special Ask Dayne Anything edition of the Roundtable. Go Wolverine!
Say the D word. Don't say the D word.
What do you mean, Dayne?
I told you that's going to get old.
Yeah, it is going to get old fast. But we've been waiting.
Everyone just clicked off the channel.
We've been waiting to do this to you for a long time there.
It's going to be several
Myers.
thumbs down.
Hey,
for this
just
video.
don't say the D word. We won't have a problem.
Oh, he's gone already. He left.
He quit.
No, just
There he is.
turn
He's
on
back.
the light, getting dark.
So, since we have one of the creators of this game that we talk about incessantly on the site, we have you here, Dayne. You're on the hot seat. We're going to ask you some questions. So, who wants to ask Dayne a question first? I think Chris Baud is just chomping at the bit to ask Dayne some questions. So, Baud, I'm going to throw it to you first. Yep. Obi Baud Kenobi.
All right, Mr. Myers.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, why don't you? I guess like we talked about in pre-gaming this. So why don't you tell us something juicy that's in store here that we'll be interested in.
Colin Powell had nothing to do with the My Lai Massacre.
Oh God, please.
What about some hot, maybe something new coming up?
So one of the things I thought it would be helpful for people to know was, we normalize the game, and I don't, and obviously I didn't have anything to do with this. Tom Tippett, who created Diamond Mine and worked for literally 20 years to make it the best simulation there is for baseball, and kept fine-tuning to get it right. So right that the Red Sox, licensed it to use to simulate stuff, which I didn't used to be able to say because we had a confidentiality agreement. In fact, the Red Sox had a veto power over our acquisition of the software, but I wasn't allowed to talk about it. And then in an interview with the Wall Street Journal, Theo Epstein tells the whole world, well, they were asking him about all the analytics tools he uses, and he says, and we use Diamond Mine to simulate various scenarios, and we think it's the best simulation, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, I'm freed from it's not public information. I can talk about it. But thanks, Theo. Could you have done it on something that doesn't require a subscription? That would have been nice. But anyway, but Tom, I think what's really cool for a game like this is that, you have to normalize, right? Because you can't, otherwise you're going to have players who are hitters in the 1930s are going to be wicked better than they should be. And hitters in the 1960s are not going to do as well as they could if you just use the straight numbers, right? And it's kind of like, I like it as like in business or finance, like inflation, right? What's a dollar worth today versus what was it worth in 1820? It's a very, very different thing. So you have to kind of take it in context. And that's the way it is with baseball. And so if you're going to get down to it, debating who's better player in baseball, you have to take into account, right? So one of the things that I don't think people realize enough in the game, the game takes into account, the aspect of what era you played in, what kind of park you played in, but especially for pitchers, it takes into account what kind of defense was behind the pitcher. So I don't think Diamond Mine, the team owners, take that into account enough. And so, and it's actually something I didn't really know that much about until recently. I just assumed that was the case. But some customers asked some specific questions, so I asked Tom Tippett, and he said, "Yep, there's a normalization factor related to the defense behind the pitcher when he pitched during a season and during his career." So the effect is more dramatic in single season because a pitcher could have a great defense behind him one season and a so-so defense the next season. It averages out over a career, but in a single season, it can be a big deal. Like let's take a look at the 1969 Orioles, right? In 69, 70. The left side of the infield, my God. And the outfield too, with Blair, patrolling center field. I mean, arguably, among the top range center fielder of all time. So one thing, one piece of advice there would be to take into account fielding independent pitching, FIP, in Baseball Reference, and if it's lower than the ERA, then the pitcher gets a little bump from Diamond Mine. If it's higher, then the pitcher gets a little bit of a fit. And it's again, I wouldn't over-index on it either because it's just one of many factors in a pitcher's performance. So that would be my little tidbit. And we're going to put in. It's not going to happen this year because our focus this year is the mobile app, which begins testing next week. But another scoop. Those turnbuckle guys, they give you a truth serum before you come on the show.
That's right.
We've been focusing on the app, but there's a whole laundry list of things we want to keep adding to the game, and the pitcher adjustment for defense is one of those that we'll put in so that you can search on it. It'd be like a rating.
Sweet.
That's
awesome.
That's really interesting. So that'll be like having a new toy to play with,
Yeah. For SSG, that's kind of crucial. I mean, you could probably, I guess, get something equivalent out of the R field from the pitcher's WAR on Baseball Reference.
Conceivably, I hadn't thought of that, but I guess you could, yeah.
But when, for Classic, you can rely on SimStats, which already has this incorporated into it. But for SSG, you don't have that resource, so it's nice to have. Yeah.
Yes.
It probably also explains, I don't know for sure, but there's certain players that come up again and again as being disappointing in this game because they don't perform as well as people expect. And I'm guessing for some of them, if you look into it, it has to do with this.
Well, I don't think it applies as much to hitters because you're facing.
I meant pitchers.
Yeah, for pitchers. I mean, who knows? Palmer, I think, would probably be one. I mean, look, the guy pitched. Part of his career during the best time to be a pitcher ever, and when pitchers had a huge advantage. And on top of that, he pitched in a fairly pitcher-friendly park. And on top of that, he had one of the best defenses of all time, arguably behind him every year. He's. If there's one thing I've through both playing the game before and now owning the game is it to me is the many things I've learned about baseball, and you think, wow, that guy was overrated. He as a pure player, and I think the two that got I think about the most are that thing, right? Defense behind a pitcher. Man, Palmer, who had it better than maybe Steve Carlton too, right? He had Schmidt, Boa in his prime, Gary Maddox patrolling center field. Maybe not so much with left field with the times they had Lazinski out there. My God, but you know what I mean. Some pitchers just had great, and it's like I wonder if you could have, back then, if every deep pitcher was normalized at the time, right? I wonder how many people would think of certain pitchers differently than they do now. And it's the same thing with hitters. Well, I mean, you think about there are some hitters that you think, wow, what a great season he had. But he's a lefty hitter who can't hit right lefties, but he happened to face almost, there were very few good lefties that year in the league, and he benefited from it. And history thinks of him as a better hitter than he actually really, really was, as far as, he just happened to that season, got lucky and faced a lot more righties than normal. So
the famous example being Snyder, because the rest of the Dodgers lineup convinced all the other teams not to pitch their lefties.
Yeah, there you go.
So
that's a great example.
A question occurs to me as you're talking about this, and maybe you don't know the answer, but does the normalization take into account BABIP luck? Like if a player has an extremely high BABIP one season, is that taken into account?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
But, I wouldn't think so, but I don't know the answer to that question, actually. So,
Steve, what you got for Mr. Myers?
I was going to ask him about the message boards. Like, who's your all-time favorite posters and who's your least favorite posters?
Wow, this is the softball question of all time. That LeMay
Okay,
Ripper,
well, maybe
he's the best. He's the best poster of the LeMay Ripper guy, whoever he is. He's the best of all time. Full stop. Nobody's better.
Posting? Yeah, right.
Oops.
That's Chris Baud. He's the Pete Rose of posting because he's very prolific.
Well, I like Chris' posts because Chris' posts are very intelligent.
Thanks.
Obi-Baud Kenobi, man.
Well, I want to say, like a lot of the things that I don't know if people find it annoying or what, but like a lot of the things that, like when I was doing research on the context for various pitchers, the big one was like Pete Alexander is undercoded, like I always come back to like these guys know what they're doing, and like they probably just coded him correctly, and it's like for whatever reason, like he ends up in like Baker Bowl a lot, and like with like inexperienced owners. So like, what I mean? That's like the kind of guiding light I have, is that you guys did things correctly, and there's just like there has to be just enormous like biases that are we can actually go through and figure it out, and just
and it's funny you mentioned that. To that specific example, we've gone and looked at the number of times we've had complaints about Pete Alexander. Another one is Steve Carlton, Satchel Paige, and we go Bob Gibson, and we've it seems like every 5 years that the bubble up is a big, there's a wellspring of that kind of complaint. So, and each time we went and, it's like, oh, let's go look at it again, just to make sure we looked at it. And every time we just come back going, it's right. There's nothing wrong. So I would say, I think some of those pitchers that don't do as well as you might think, again, maybe the defense was a factor. And then I think maybe the normalization, people don't take enough into account normalization for Park and era and stuff like that. But I also think there's with some pitchers, I don't know if this is the case with Alexander. I know it's the case with Carlton, that, they had some down years in the middle of their window peak that we use for the, to normalize the, that window, what do you call it? A peak window. And Chris, I know I remember seeing some post about you questioning the semantics, but whatever you call it, the window you use there, it was done to actually benefit long career players. And the idea is, the normal Major League Baseball player's career, you're early, unless you're one of the rookies of the year type candidates, right? You kind of have some ramp up time, so you kind of get it, really kind of start killing it. and then you have a plateau that lasts a long time, that has some peaks and whatever in it, and then you start to decline as you get old, right? That's just common sense. That's the way a player profile would normally go. Guys that had short careers didn't get that decline. So maybe they had an injury, you know, that ended their career early, and so they never had that decline. So, or, you know, whatever other reason, they had one bad season and washed out, who knows? But they may have had some numbers that were, you know, if they played longer, they probably would have declined and their overall numbers wouldn't look so good. So that's not fair to the guys like Willie Mays, who played 20 something years. So how do you even that out? And the way we did it was to say, okay, look, we're going to take a standard career for what and Tom had done some research on this and determined that 6,000 plate appearances was kind of like a full career. So we cut off anything that was weak before the 6,000 and after the 6,000 to way that concentrates a long career player on what is the normal. And short career players get what they get, and that is what it is. But within that, it's rare that you have dips in the middle of that 6,000 for a long career player. But there are some players, and Steve Carlton is a classic example. I can't remember which year it is. He was pretty crappy. You know, he had some extremes within that with pitchers. It's not 6,000 plate appearances, but it's you know, this combination. It's for a guy like Carlton, it's gonna be 250 starts, and he surprisingly has some up and downs that smooth out his peak more, and that's an unusual case. And am I getting too far in the weeds?
I think I mean, my feeling is there's an argument that, I mean, you can certainly make an argument for coding guys differently, right? And then Carlton would appear better, but
yeah, and to yes, and to that point, what we could do, and we've talked about doing, and then the question comes up: was it really worth it? Was taking, instead of you know, a certain consecutive, you could take, you know, certain seasons and just say we're going to take the 6 best seasons or the 10 best seasons.
Right. Specifically with Carlton is he has such an unusual, like his best 2 seasons are like 11 years apart or something. Like
right. Yeah, exactly. So that's right. So that would kind of fit. But what we decided instead was, well, rather going back and redoing what is really a small number of players, right? It's the exception. They're the exception, Carlton's the exception, not the norm. So rather than go back and try and redo everything just because of some small number of exceptions, let's just put out the single season game, which is, you know, a more if you want Steve Carlton as a pick at his peak, go get, was it 72 or 73 Carlton? Yeah, go get 72 Steve Carlton, and then you'll have the Steve Carlton that you remember. Anyway, that's my thought on that. I mean, I think maybe somewhere once we get the apps out that we might revisit that, especially if Chris bugs me enough.
Dayne, I got a question for you. Who's the greatest college football team of all time, and why is it the Ohio State Buckeyes?
Well, the winningest team. I'm only here to talk about the facts, and we're data driven. In baseball, we're data driven, so let's be data driven in football. And the winningest football team at any level of all time is the University of Michigan Wolverines. More wins than any other institution on the planet. So I think that's the one fact we have at our fingertip. We know is fact based.
Agreed. I decided to throw that out there. I've been dying to throw an Ohio State joke at you for a long time, and I got many more to come.
Well, that's kind of redundant, isn't it? Yeah. Ohio State joke is kind of redundant.
Oh, boom! Dave, being a fan of fantasy baseball that you are, you like to play the game. I mean, obviously, we're talking about this because of your love of playing these kind of games. Like, what's your favorite, kind of game modes to play? Like single season, classic, SSG, whatever. Like, well, what is your go-to stuff? Like, if you're, wanting to play.
Well, that's a good. Well, let's talk about what I would do if I had more time. because this isn't my day job. And what I do, I mean, the most important thing, I'm in a few leagues and it's really friends, right? It's guys that I've played with and gals. The classic is Who's Your Daddy, which was started during our beta testing. It's now in 64th league, I think, 64th season or something like that. Larry Larson started it. And that group, we have been since the very beginning. The deal has been, if anybody finishes a better record than me gets a $10 credit. Anybody finishes a worse record than me has to donate $10 to the charity of my choice. And for a while, the charity of my choice was Big Brothers Big Sisters, because I was both a big brother and on the board and of the Bay Area chapter. And then it be switched to some pet rescue stuff, because that became a pet cause, pardon the pun, for my wife and me. And so that one, it's the Who's Your Daddy is the trash talk every season. It's same, it's like, people who lose to me apologize on the message board. It's like they're all ganging up on me. It's a lot of fun. It's a good group of people. And then there's the old pro league, which is named after Jack Cavan. And if it weren't for Jack Cavan, I doubt we might not be having this discussion, because I was playing the old stats game, Bill James Classic Baseball, back in the day in the mid 90s. And I sucked at the start. And Jack, being sweet old guy that he was, kind of took me under his wing, as he did anybody who asked for help, Jack helped them. And Jack helped me, and it wasn't long before I was better than Jack, but that's another story. But that's kind of like Obi-Wan and and then his Jedi Masters and all that stuff. But who's better, right? The student or the teacher in the end. But anyway, Jack didn't care. He's just a great guy. And so my team in that league did. So that he always called himself the old pro. And he used to run leagues where you'd pay extra, and he'd give you the winner of the league would get a baseball bat with your name carved in it, as the champion of the league. And I did one of those, and I won the league, and I still have the bat. And he started calling me the young pro. So he was the old pro, nice. And I was the young pro. So I still have, Dayne, incoming.
He did it to himself. Awesome.
So it says name the young pro champion of such and such league. And so when Jack died, I mean, what was this, like at least more than 10 years ago? It was like 08 maybe. We renamed the league the Old Pro League, and my team name, if you're interested, in that league always is the Master Chefs. And the reason it's the Master Chefs is because Jack was a Master Chief Petty Officer in the Navy before he retired from the Navy, and he I remember having these AOL instant message chats with him about the game, and when we chatted once about what he'd done in his life, he said that he was a Master Chief in the Navy, but he did a typo and it said Master Chef. And I said, you were that good of a cook? And he said, no, Master Chief. And I said, well, what did you make for people that made them say you were the Master Chef? And I just kept ignoring him, trying to correct me. And it drove him. Years later, I'd introduce him. We started having a live draft in the Bay Area every year. And he would come up in the train from Bakersfield, where he was from. And I would introduce him to everybody. And he was a Master Chef in the Navy. And it just drove him nuts that I kept calling. So my team name is the Master Chefs in his honor. So those are the kind of leagues I like to play, because it's more friends. But if you ask me, like if I had more time and I did more leagues, I like progressions and keepers, because you have to think more long-term strategy. And I did one. Some of you know about I do occasionally these. I call them the Big Dogs League, and dogs is spelled DAWGS. And the big dogs are supposed to be like ridiculously tough rules and harsh. And the concept is there is no whining in big dogs. So if you can't run with the big dogs, don't join the league, because it's like one of the things is if you draft, we have a manual draft, and if you draft a player And you cut him after the draft. Sorry, you don't. You get a penalty as if it was the regular season. So you better draft carefully, right? And of course, somebody will mess up, and they're usually low. The salary caps are such that, or the player pools are limited such that we always run out at the end, and somebody's really hurting. And then most recently I did one that was my life in baseball. So it's various phases from I was born in 62 all the way up to the present in blocks. So we did 62 to 69 because that was before I knew what baseball was. And then I became a rabid baseball fan in 1970. So the next period is 70 to 79 when the Pittsburgh Pirates won 2 World Series and 6 division titles and were the best team in the 70s. So and we know, who wasn't, but that was a great time to be growing up near Pittsburgh, right? So and then it went on through, right? So that it was in blocks, but you had to think you could trade draft picks, you could trade future considerations, all sorts of stuff. So the stuff that I like, the stuff that kind of recreates the strategy of a real GM has to think through, I think are really cool. So progression leagues, keeper leagues, limited pools, and I haven't interested. I'd like to do more single season stuff just because it's new. It's newer. It seems like it just still seems like yesterday that we put it in place. But I think I'd like to do more single season stuff just for trying it out. So anyway, does that answer your question?
Yes, and we need to get this Turnbuckle League going. So
yes, we do.
We can take advantage of getting those $10 credits from you.
Yeah,
I think all 5 of us will.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Bring it on, man. I was one of the things that kind of waylaid that was when I found out. I think you guys saw the newsletter we talked about and the post in the message board about Michael Staubenfield. I'm mispronouncing his name, but who unfortunately has stage 4 prostate cancer, and so kind of in his honor and at his request, we did this promotion to promote prostate cancer awareness and get your tests and all that stuff. So that little fundraiser kind of jumped in between. But we will, once we get that underway, wrapped up, then we'll go ahead and so if I can do a public service announcement while we're here and just say to everybody who's watching, who's a male of appropriate age, which is really 50 and older, get your prostate test. And don't end up like Michael, unfortunately, who kept not getting his test and paid the price. So Michael once, it's kind of like he asked to, if you saw it in the newsletter article and in the post, he wrote that message himself because he wanted to get that word out. So and I'm off my soapbox now and end of public service announcement.
David, DVD. What you got? Anything for Mr. Myers?
With all those books, he better. I mean,
I had, but by this time I'm forgot what it was. Well, I do want to ask: at what point? This is for you, but also for anybody else it applies to. When did you discover whatever your first sabermetric work was, whether it was Bill James or Palmer and Thorne or whatever, and what kind of impact did that have on you?
I didn't know a thing about. It's kind of interesting because I had kind of lost interest in baseball after I started there was a big decline with the 81 strike, and I was just so kind of like irritated. But also, I was now in college. I was paying more attention to football now, and you're in college, you got other things on your mind, you're away from home. I also couldn't watch the Pirates because cable, the whole thing of every game being on cable didn't exist yet. So now I was out of range to watch or listen to the Pirates. So add all that up together, and I started losing interest in baseball and, kind of dabbled in it and kept some interest. And then I just started getting more interested in it again in the mid 90s when they go and they canceled the freaking World Series. Are you kidding me? You millionaires and billionaires can't get, your act together enough to find a way to keep from, losing the World Series, really? And I said, now I'm done with you. And there's a funny story too about even before that, when I how I tried to what I was doing to save the San Francisco Giants and keep them in San Francisco, but and I ended up on the front page of the San Francisco Chronicle and tell the mayor to stop, get a local owner to buy the team, stop trying to convince the National League to veto the sale. And sure enough, local ownership stepped up and bought the team. But the I kind of lost interest, and then again because of the World Series thing being canceled, another strike. I'm like, okay, I'm done with baseball. And then the husband of one of my best friends from law school, he had even written a book on the history of the New York / San Francisco Giants. Nobody kill me for that. He was so into baseball, and he said, "You got to try this game." And he tried to get me to try and he hooked me into what was Bill James Classic Baseball. And at first I was like, I had no idea about sabermetrics or normalization or anything like that. But then, so of course my team sucked. And then somebody said, well, are you paying any attention to normalization? Because it looks like you're not. You're just drafting, players who whatever. And I was like, what the hell is normalization? And the rest, as they say, is history. Oh, you should. And so literally one of my friends bought one of the Bill James books for me and as a gift, and said, here, you need this. And if you're going to play this game, you need this. And I went and bought a copy of, one of those baseball reference books, not like the website. There was a book back in the day.
Total Baseball.
Yeah. Total Baseball. Big almanac thing.
Yep. Yes. Yep. And I got a copy of Total Baseball off of this new site called Amazon or something at the time. And like I said, that's when I started learning about it, and the rest is history. And as an aside, speaking of Bill James, I actually tried to get a deal with Bill to put the name on the game. And that was when he was still consulting for the Red Sox, and he kind of said he was kind of done with this sort of thing and turned me down. So,
that's interesting. Yeah, because
I actually talked to him on the phone. Tippett made the intro, and so we had a conversation on the phone, and he said, I just don't want to go back there. So.
For me,
I couldn't convince him.
The other way around. It was the interest in sabermetrics that led me to the stats game, and then after taking a break back here.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, I think that's how most people got there, because if you remember, you remember the AOL message boards?
Sure.
We were all Bill big Bill James people, I think, back then.
That's how I got here too.
And the USA Today online message board before AOL even.
Okay. I wasn't there then, but
I didn't know about that.
What happened to Pants Rowan? Remember him?
You were gone. You took a hiatus, didn't you?
Yeah, like 12 years.
Well, I don't know. I can't. I don't know what the legal ramifications are saying, but let's just say Pants was his account was suspended for behavior on the message board.
Oh, I see. All right.
That brings up an interesting topic, like how many people get banned from.
I'm glad you asked that, because a couple things. One, so the site we are now 16 and a half years old since it'll be the first tests of the game were Thanksgiving weekend 17 years ago. 16. Let's see, it was 05. So yeah, so if this next month it'll be the 16 years since we started the test, since we built the first version, and we were frantically building it. So 16 years ago this month we were frantically building it, and then we launched commercially. It was 15 years ago this past March. So the site's been operating commercially for 15 and a half years. I don't think we've banned even 15 people in the whole hit. It's an average of maybe one a year.
Wow.
And some of them are people you never heard of who got banned for things like cheating. They were gaming this, they had two teams in one league. And stuff like that. So the people who got banned for message board behavior is maybe a dozen or fewer. It's less than one a year. A few and almost exclude all of those are almost entirely racist comments on the message boards that they wouldn't refrain from.
So I was gonna maybe say, do any stand out to you that were especially horrible?
Well, I think the thing that frustrates me, if I might go on a little bit of a rant, is I mean, I have political leanings to the left of center, and and I was accused by certain people who quit actually playing the game forever because he believed that I was politically biased in the people I banned. And it just so happened that in a stretch of period, there were like 4 people in a row who were banned who were, staunch conservatives on the message board. So it was accused it was my political bias. But in no case was it ever, it's like, no, those people it just so happened they were conservative, but their behavior was the same. And there have been, liberals that were banned from the site too. It was completely wrong. And that person made a big fuss about it. He made a fuss about it on Facebook and all this stuff and saying, conservatives aren't welcome. I said, well, that's just crap. And that was years ago. And in fact, but yeah, it was all racist comments that, and the ones that stand out are, unfortunately, it still shocks me in this day and age that people behave that way. But it's unfortunate, but there were certain lines I said, and in each case, by the way, everyone's given a warning. And then the second offense, if they do it again, there's countless suspended. But suspended, it's not permanent ban. And then it's like if they promise not to do it again, and you say, hey, look, I lost my cool, I won't do it again, we let you back. And
one guy who did that repeatedly, deceased now.
Unfortunately, rest in peace. But there were those quote unquote conservatives that this one customer was complaining about, all refused to back down, all refused to say the behavior was wrong. One of them was on severe anti-Semitic rants, repeatedly trying to convert them to Christianity because Jews are automatically lost. He said, I think we all know who we're talking about here. And without using,
he was my favorite. He
Yeah,
was my favorite. I
think
loved that guy.
he and the guy I was just talking about should be locked in a room for eternity.
That would be awesome. I would pay to see that. But I try to avoid it, like, as much as possible. I don't want to get into this. We like to, the off-topic board is, hey, have at it. We try to not to interfere. There's all those messages about, hey, you might get offended or up there, but there's just lines that I think you have to draw a line at some point. And I had at least half a dozen customers write and say that if we didn't do something about that, they were going to quit. And I thought they were right.
Dayne kicked me out of the league once for using Billy Starr. Yeah, Dayne kicked me out of the league one time for using Billy Superstar Graham quotes on some noobs. I was crushing that league. And I was just dropping Superstar Billy Graham quotes on them left and right. There's this old school wrestler that used to talk like that. I was cutting and pasting his stuff. I didn't even make that stuff up. That team won 120 games after he kicked me out of the league. That team was good.
He canceled Mutzu. It's great.
It canceled the Lee May Rippers. That's the only Lee May Ripper team. It's like the Lee May Ripper team with the most wins too. And I'm my name's not under it because got the boot.
Oh, that makes it all the better. That situation was one where, interesting enough, another podcast was they had brought in a whole bunch of their listeners. Are they listeners or viewers if they have a video version? They were trying to have a fun league of kind of like their community, and Steve was ruining it, and so they asked me to do something about it. So I was
ruining it by winning like 9 out of every 10 games. It was kind of wrong.
That you were ruining it by winning. You were ruining it by trash talking these poor noobs into the ground. And it's like, okay, I mean, if you want to, it's kind of like, what is it? It's kind of like some all-pro linebacker going and playing in high school football and beating people
Yeah,
up.
it was. It was, but hey, they did call me out.
To do that, but then to brag and he's standing above the guy, you just flattening. Ah!
I was literally cutting and pasting superstar Billy Graham quotes, just one after another. It didn't even make sense. I don't know why people got mad at me talking about like stuff that happened in 1977. I cut and pasted anyway. It didn't matter.
I wasn't offended. I wasn't offended by anything you said, but the commissioner of the league asked for you to be removed.
Yeah. Oh. Hey, that's all right.
The commissioner himself said, "Can you get this bozo out of here?"
Nice.
So now it was a perfect storm. It was a perfect storm. I had like all the two-way players. I had it all worked out perfectly, man. I mean, everything was rolling real good. And that team won 120 games without a manager. Because that was like 30-4 when they kicked me out of the league or something.
Oh no, they had a manager.
Because you were against
I gave that team to somebody else. So they
you did?
Max. Oh yeah.
Oh really? They got a hell of a boost there.
Yeah,
I thought that team went unmanaged.
No.
I'm guessing a lot of your opponents were
as someone said on the message board, wow, the new owner made that team better.
Oh yeah. Got it.
Was it the case too that you were like facing a bunch of teams that didn't know about the value of defense and stuff like that?
I don't know what was going on. I was just trying to put some superstar Billy Graham quotes out there, and that was about all I was doing. Just one after another. Did not make any sense at all. It was just.
I play a lot of standard leagues, and you do come across a lot of players where you can kind of tell just because of the team they put together that this is somebody who's really just starting here.
Yeah.
It would be nice if the standard ladder was like an invitation to it was part of an introduction package or something. So
that's a nice segue. Why don't you guys tell me what you think we should do differently? And I'm particularly interested in what you guys think we ought, now that we're producing a mobile app, what you ought to be in that, or other things you'd like to see us change or do.
I think new owners should be placed mostly with other new owners and with one or two mentors in a league.
I think that would be awesome.
I'm hoping that the solitaire leagues will help with that too. They can learn on their own without having to get their butts handed to them. I mean, when you get onto it, it's a complicated game, and it's hard. It's not easy to,
Right. And read the reference section. I mean, even if there's nothing else, just fancy. Somebody registers, send them an email with some tips, including read the reference section.
Well, we do actually. When you first register, you get an email, and it says, "Here, we strongly encourage you to read the reference section. Here's a link."
Okay,
so
cool.
When you sign up, you get that. But one thing, it's interesting you mentioned that, because one thing we did do, new customers, new are going to get a tip sheet. So written by yours truly on how to win. I would have gone to one of you, but it would have been not as good. So
nice.
But it's kind of like it's the basic stuff, like, don't do the death spiral, defense matters, some highlights. I mean, actually, I'll send it to you guys if you want. You can take a look and
I'd
comment.
love to see that.
But from now on, it's going out to when you sign up. New customers, get a free credit. And when they make their first purchase, it's a 2-for-1, right? So one of the things we're about to implement a thing where to claim for the free credit, you have to click on the link to get the tip sheet. So it's almost like you have to see it. So I'm hoping that'll address the problem.
I was thinking somebody made the suggestion a few months ago, I don't remember who, on the message boards, and it kind of got a lot of pushback, but the idea was have like a warning when people are about to drop a really expensive player. And people made some reasonable arguments against that, but I was thinking this tip sheet that you have probably already addresses this, so it's probably a moot point now, but I was thinking for standard leagues, having that extra warning that this is probably a bad idea was I hate watching death spirals, even when they're in my division. It's just really awful to watch. But
right, yeah. Actually, it would help if anybody sees a death spiral, just ping support, and we can, maybe it would help for us to reach out to that customer and say, hey, or just do it yourself.
That would be cool. I mean,
people love
I've thought about reaching out, but then you also worry that people are going to get really mad at you for.
What about if it was just like, it's like a warning, like your salary cap is starting to dip real low. I mean, you've got 85% the value of everybody else, or something like that, where they could see how bad it's getting, because you really can't tell, because you can't see the total of everybody's teams.
That's interesting. If you could put the total value of the roster.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. That's exactly what popped in my head as well. That's your total roster value. We should display that somewhere. Yeah. And then they would see, if it's going up or down. That's a great idea, actually.
Yeah, maybe it could turn red if it starts to dip below league average or something.
Yeah,
right. Put the league average on there too.
Yeah, there you go.
Because that would encourage people not to.
I was gonna say I saw a guy who had Greg Maddux and dropped him like 3 weeks in, and then dropped Eddie Matthews, and I'm like, this is killing your team's value.
Although I'm sure there's some rare scenarios where somebody did something like that and it helped them, but that salary cap thing is a great idea. Now that I think about it.
What other features are going to be on the mobile app? I know you've told us before, Dayne, but but I know live games are going to be on it.
So the first version is going to be like a head-to-head live game thing, and then we'll start introducing leagues into the mobile app. So that's the plan. But we're also going to do the app's going to be separate from the site, so we'll add solitaire leagues to the site as well. There's just different features, different things you can do in an app that you can't do on the site, and vice versa. So we have to do them in pieces.
I'm curious about the update, the huge. I know it has to be a huge project, the huge Negro League update, right?
Oh.
Yes.
What do you anticipate about that?
Well, unfortunately, we need to change the date because I don't think we're going to get done this year. Because we're getting data, the data source that we're getting is a little overwhelmed right now, and but they promised us an early version. But so there's the business and engineering side of it, shall we say? Charles is working on that. We've had some issues with some of our staff having health issues, so it's kind of reduced our capacity right now. Hopefully people are getting back to recovering right now. So I don't think it's going to get done this year, but because it's almost like rather we could do it piecemeal, but there's all sorts of new data. So to do the normalization, it's for one thing to get all this data on the Negro League players, right? But if you can't normalize it, now you've got an issue. So what we're trying to do is get like park factor information, even from the Negro League parks, so that we can then normalize. But you need a comprehensive data set before you can normalize. So what we started out trying to see a way about doing it in pieces, because as the data comes in and you get it, but then we took a step back and said, no, we got to get this, and you got to have a comprehensive data set so you can normalize. Yeah. So I was afraid. Yeah, let's just.
How's that data how is that data being gathered?
There are a couple of ways. There's mostly volunteers who are pulling that stuff together, sort of like RetroSheet. People are just have a passion for it, and I believe MLB is now putting money into that to help fund that or something like that. But anyway, bottom line is we couldn't do it right without getting the full data. So rather than get it out fast because everybody would like to have it, it's like let's get it. Because we're gonna redo everybody. So Whether Buck Leonard is better or less than he is now in the game now, we'll see. Pop Lloyd, same thing. I mean, there's some players are going to go up, some players are going to go down, but let's get it right. If we're going to change it, let's get it right.
I've got a related question, not about Negro League specifically, but you've got players who played somewhat in the Negro Leagues and somewhat in organized baseball. And I assume you're going to have them have one integrated career now and rate them on their 6,000 PA for wherever those 6,000 PA happen to be.
Hadn't actually thought about that yet, to be honest.
Okay. I was assuming it would be, and I was going to put in a request to do the same thing for Japanese players.
Also,
the info for the Japanese players anyway, and they played here, including Americans, people who started here and went there, include what they did in Japan and figuring out how good they are.
Oh, now you're giving me a headache.
Yeah,
that would be fun. That'd be fun. If you had like the
it would be fun.
Boomer Wells and people like that.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, so we'll. That's interesting. I'll tell Charles. Charles is the one. Charles is heading up that project. I'll pass the word on to him, and suggest he look at that.
Well, I want to say that I want to give you guys credit because I honestly there's I've studied a lot about the Negro Leagues and there's 100 things I could say. Well, I think this guy is this or whatever, but I think you guys in 2006 did an amazing job of creating these player profiles of that. I mean, I think you really did the top stars, really did them justice, I mean, you really did. This game that's one of the best things about this game is it gives you a sense of what Josh Gibson's status is in the game and guys like that.
Well, most of the credit there goes to Charles.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah,
he did most of the work of the Negro League players.
Yeah, because I know there was almost no statistical information back then was very sparse. Yeah, way less than it is now. Yeah,
that's why we only have the players we did. We only used players where there was some data. That was the only ones that got in the game. I think the most shocking thing right now is we've been talking about Negro League players all the time. This time, and Mr. Mutzu hasn't. Mentioned that he was the one who cracked the code on how to play. Even though he's wrong, but
wow, how was I wrong about that?
You thought it was they were clones, and they weren't clones. They're not clones.
They were at first.
Nope,
they were at first. Well, how are their stats exactly the same then?
No, so what we did was. We started as clones. So what we did was we took a player who said, okay, like Yount and Wells were started as clones, but then we said, okay, but Wells was a little better at this, so we tweaked that, and a little less at this. And
but that tweaking came after I said they were clones. That's how I knew they were clones, because they were clones. I wouldn't have known they were clones if they weren't. I'd have been these guys are two different people. What? I was like, no.
Dayne is talking about run ratings and defense ratings. Those were changed.
Yeah, it's what depends on when you were talking.
Well, not at that point they weren't. I still got some of that data.
Okay, it depends on when we were talking. If you were talking about before we did the commercial launch, yes, you're right.
I'm talking about at the moment I posted that thread that says Spotswood Pulse or whatever. That shit was exactly the same at that point.
Well, if you said that in 2006, yes. If you said that after, no, you're wrong.
Oh. I don't remember when it was. I have no idea.
The Clone Wars.
The Clone Wars. Yeah. Hey. I thought it was kind of cool because it really showed how accurate the sim is. Because everybody, Willie Wilson and Spotswood Post some of their numbers were exactly the same. I don't know what it was. 13.7 for triples. The other guy be 13.7 for triples. And they're based on ball factors and strikeout factors. We're all exactly the same. A lot of their numbers were exactly the same.
There's got to be a lot of luck in that too, though, because I bet you if you released two identical versions of Babe Ruth and had them randomly chosen for each league or whatever, there's going to be differences between their stats.
Some of their stats, though, are going to look the same. Some of them, the base on ball factor, K factor.
They're going to be off by a bit, I think.
Some will be real close.
Yeah.
Shockingly close.
You'll be able to figure it out. I'm not saying you wouldn't be able to figure it out, but I think there would be like there's this really cool post from a long time ago that I found where they were talking about you have to view each league as sort of having its own ecology, because you're going to face different, even in the same salary cap, you're going to face different pitching quality from league to league. So it's going to affect batting averages and stuff like that, and different defenses and all in different parks and stuff. So I think,
how many lefty hitters there are, I find varies a lot from league to league.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in a division right now. The league just started, so I'm expecting this to change before Monday, but it's got like 2 left-handed starters in the division, except not including my team. And I'm like, that's probably really good information to know and hope it doesn't change.
What a lot of people really want to know, Mr. Myers, is when are we going to get guys like Pedro Serrano and Bull Durham and Benny the Jet Rodriguez?
That's what I want to know.
And Mr. Baseball and the kid from Rookie of the Year who throws that high stinky cheese. I mean, come on, man. Wouldn't that be awesome?
I'm sure if there are other clownish games that you can go play and have those players in it, but they're never going to be hard.
I asked that for Steve because I know he really.
What about create a player?
Now that's one. So you can do that in the PC game, and I think my goal is to put all the capabilities in the PC game into the app world. So eventually we'll have that. Yes.
Maybe you could have it to where like if you win your league or your division or something like that, you earn like more points to make your creative player better, and you have to win. You have to win over time to be able to, get those attribute points where you can kind of boost up, the thing that you want. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah. The one thing I think would be cool would be to say, all right, it costs you money to build the player. So
I bet you think that's probably cooler.
Take that away from your other players.
Yeah.
You talking salary money or real money?
Either.
I have a question about the Negro League relaunch. Or do you know what parks you're going to be adding?
Charles is doing all that work. I don't know.
Okay.
I know he's waiting on some data on parks right now, so I don't know which parks. To be honest, I didn't.
I saw somebody mention Dickman Oval, and it made me look it up. And it looks like Dickman Oval, if it gets added, will make the Baker Bowl look like a pitcher's park.
Ooh.
Those of us closer to the Bronx pronounce it as Dykeman.
Is
I'm
it?
moving
Okay,
out of Coors if that's the case. I'm moving straight out of Coors if that's the case.
David is the wordsmith of the bunch for sure, with his corrections all the time, saying Trammell and Trammel and all these other abominations we say.
Oh yeah, did you catch that video? Steve had Matt convinced that it was pronounced Alan Trammell, and he was trying to convince the rest of us.
I don't know what's going on with those. I used to call Nap Lajoie Nap Lajoie. That's what I used to call him. That's how bad I pronounce it.
Actually, myself. So I have a question for you guys. You've seen one of the users, H. Hoover or whatever, has written some code to have the play-by-play do a sound.
Yeah.
We've looked at that multiple times over the years, and I never wanted to do it because I always thought it sounded bad, and you'd get, after it wouldn't take long before you'd say, okay, I'm sick of this. But the way he had it, it seems like it's, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe things are getting better now that you could. So what do you guys think about having the sound?
Well, I thought I wanted that forever. I used to always put that on my Sim Santa wish list every year. But then I got it, and I'm like, I can't listen to this. It takes too long. I just no way. It's long.
I listen to all my games like that.
Yeah, there's no better person to ask that.
That's
than
true.
Tyler.
That's true.
That's true. So Tyler, is it well? So do you get like, okay, this canned sound is getting on my nerves?
No, but I've been using screen readers my whole life, so they don't bother me the way they bother I mean, I kind of think anybody can get used to it. I don't know. Like, I assume Hoover doesn't use a screen reader, and I know he uses it for all of his games. I mean, I find it great because you don't need to be sitting in front of your computer to watch your game. You can.
That's it. Yeah, the question is, what's the alternative? I never look at play-by-play unless I'm looking for something specific, like to see why somebody was removed from a game, if it was he was ejected or something, because it takes too long. It would be nice, by the way, if you could switch to a half inning rather than switching to a whole inning. Speed things up a bit.
But maybe like a recap.
But
not a whole game, but a recap.
But with the sound, it can be on the background, and you can pay attention when you want. So if the alternative is not using play-by-play at all, then the canned sound might be a little bit annoying, but I'll take it.
Okay.
And you can speed it up too. Like, there's people today who listen to people who aren't blind who listen to podcasts on like time and a half or double time because if you practice at it, you can get good at it. So like right now, the files that the script creates are about, I mean, it depends on the game, but between 30 minutes and 45 minutes usually, I think, although a lot of that's a post-game show. You could probably cut that in half if you doubled the speed and got good at actually being able to understand it at that speed.
Right. Or maybe just to recap, who hit home runs, this guy was 4 for 4, this pitcher won, and we're done. 5 minutes, we're out of there.
But
something
you can
like
see
that
on the box score page, right?
Yeah, you can.
You know what I mean? But if you're wanting to listen to it, you maybe just don't want to listen for 45 minutes. You maybe just want to listen for 5 minutes.
While you're
3 games total in 50. Yeah, something like that. I really wanted this feature until I got it. And I was like, yeah, that's way too long. I can't do that all the time. I can't listen to 45-minute games.
I think the radical thing, which this might be really advanced, like we might need to like have really smart AI or something, would be like to have like it wouldn't even have to be with sound, just like kind of like an automated highlights of your league, like this team has won 10 in a row, and this pitcher threw his second shutout of the week, something like that.
Yeah, like that thing we used to get in the mail in the old days. In the old snail mail days, we used to get one of those, and I loved that thing. I like waited for it every week, and I'd finally get it all. I even remember some of the stuff they said in that.
Even
I
if
really looked forward to that thing.
Page, just the interesting league highlights that were computer generated would be very nice.
Okay.
What about at the end of the league? It says who was the MVP and who was the Cy Young or something like that. Just some formula.
Yeah, that would be
something like that. Or you could vote for the All-Stars and the MVP or something. Something like that.
That'd be fun if you could vote. If there was like vote for the league MVP and everybody could do that. That would be that seems like it would be kind of easy. Cool. That'd be easy too, and that would be tremendous, like just whatever, generating discussion. Right.
That sounds like something good for the app, I would think.
Yeah, would be. Okay.
One last question. SSG or Classic? Which is better? Which is harder? We all debate this amongst ourselves a lot. I'd like to hear it from you.
I love them both equally.
Children.
That's like saying
I do got something for these guys here that always say this 300 plate appearance thing. Like you just use 300 plate appearances and stick the guy. You got to finesse those 300 plate appearances. You work that. You don't just throw the guy out there for 300 plate appearances. DVD's always saying it on the message board. That's his big complaint, is that you could use these short. But man, when you get a guy like that, you finesse him the whole year. You make him work.
It's still the fact that Dan Glad. You might not pick him up until there are 300 seasons. You might use somebody else, and then you can't if he's good against both lefties and righties. So yeah, I don't think you characterized what I said fairly, which is why I'm coming in here. If somebody's going to be flirting with 400 for the season, for 350 plate appearances, it would be better if that somebody is not Dan Gladden.
And I wouldn't
like Dan
say that think
No, he doesn't.
I think
He does
you
not
could
like
argue,
Dan Gladden. I'm gonna get a Dan Gladden button.
I don't dislike Dan Gladden, but his rookie season was a fluke, and you use that fluke as the basis for the coding because you're trying to replicate the season, despite the fact that his skill level is already overrepresented by luck. And then you take the lucky season and make that the skill level, and it can be overrepresented again.
But he really did get that lucky.
Example
that happened
from the 1980s. Maybe
but you're making the
newer
luckiness the average, is David's point. The problem is that he could get lucky twice, so he could get luck on top of his already lucky season.
That's right. And no, I still like SSG. I like Classic better, but I like them both. But you always talk about why, there's nothing better about Classic. Well, that's something better about Classic.
And
is that if somebody's going to be flirting with 400, it's going to be Rod Carew, not Dan Gladden.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I never thought about it like that before. But I'm going to be drafting a lot of Dan Gladden from now on. I know that much. He's my new favorite player. Him and DJ Carrasco.
I would probably agree that SSG is harder. For me, I don't see the fun in trying to manage a guy's at bats. Like in real life, I've never seen a player shut down because he hit 400 plate appearances. But in SSG, you have to do that.
Well, that happens all the time. Steven Strasburg, didn't he get shut down once he got 110 inning pitch or something like that?
Pitchers. Not batters.
Well, the thing is, if we didn't do that, you wouldn't be able to you would have the fluke. The Dan Gladden would have 660 plate appearances. That was one thing.
No. I understand the rationale behind it. It's just why I find Classic more fun, and I've never played SSG, so I'm sort of being unfair. But
Turnbuckle League.
I don't know.
Turnbuckle League's going to have to be SSG because there's too many people who haven't played SSG.
The thing about SSG is, I think, it's best. If you want its truest, purest, best form, you should only play one season, and play everything in 1979 or whatever. And we know series in 1979, but you should play it in one season only, maybe a few. And have the limited player pool and all that kind of stuff, and that's how you get that's real. That's more true realistic thing. And then the plate appearances, you can't game it as much. You don't have to manage it as much because it's truer form. It's when you get into these situations where you're trying to. Another way, I've seen some other guys deal with that is they just set minimums. You can't have somebody who didn't have if they're below certain plate appearances, then you can't have them in the league.
I think
I would like that more.
Baseball, where you'll have this really fluky guy with he has 20 at bats, an amazing card, right? So what the SSG does is
the classic example of that is I think it was Hank Aguirre. Is that how you pronounce his name? Aguirre.
The pitcher for the Tigers.
He had one at bat in, I think it was 1970 or something like that, and he got a triple. So or it's 2 at bats or something like that, and so you people would put it as a pinch hitter all the time. There you go.
Yeah,
guaranteed to get you a triple.
I used to do that with Skeeter Barnes. He went 1 for 4 with a homer one year. I just used that guy all the time. Skeeter Barnes.
So that's just not real. I mean, and the classic example when we did this was Timo Perez in I don't know what year it was, 2010, something like that. He hit 390 in 90 plate appearances. Now, there's your Dan Gladden example again. I mean, and because you put him in a better park than Tiger Stadium or Comerica, whichever it was then, and he's guaranteed to hit 400 pretty much. And especially if you let him
yeah.
So it's to
players overperform. I guess that players overperform their coding about half the time. So.
Well, that's the way it should work out.
That's the way it should work out.
So we had to do that to prevent the abuse, but also the unrealism. But then again, we allow people to, hey, you wanna play it that way, you go for it. I mean, you want to have those guys play all day long. Well, that we give you the option to do that. So it's kind of like we make it try to keep the realism, but let people, if they want to do crazy stuff, go do them. Have at it.
So
man.
you can turn that off, the limits.
Yeah.
Yep.
You
When you set up
I think
You can. Yep.
when you set up the
so
league,
you
get
could
the option.
do a league. You could do a league where you did like nobody can play unless they had at least 500 at bats or a certain number of innings, and then turn off the limits.
I don't think the minimum playing time is built in, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there is. Isn't there a 20? You have to have 20 plate appearances, or they add replacement player plate appearances to the 20. Or, you know what I'm saying?
That, but like you can also just limit, like, so they have to have like 100 at bats or like 40 innings pitched or something like that.
Yeah, when you set up the league, I think it's got a you can set it up with the custom league options. So you can set up, it's got to have a minimum. You can set minimum parameter.
I had to say, I was in a I've been in this it's like a limited player pool thing where you have a franchise and you get 20 years of the team, you know. So like I had the A's starting in 1920, and now we're setting up the new league for 1980. It's been fun just like discovering the guys that are like, oh, there's this, I forget what his name is. There's some catcher from like 1937 who hit like 380 for 150 at bats, you know. So I never heard of this guy, and you know, he hit 360 for me for 150 at bats, and those things are fun. Like, you know, there's a lot of those type of things. Obviously, you're doing it all the time with like relief pitches and stuff too. So like, you know, I think there's value to it. It depends on what you're trying to do with the league, I guess. If you're trying to recreate a season, or if you're, you know, progression league or whatever. I mean, I think there's a lot of talk about this on the message board lately, which seems to, I'm sympathetic to what people are saying, but it seems like they want very, very, very specific things for like very specific leagues, which seems like I don't know. It seems like they can almost get what they want, but they just want a little bit more. I don't know. Like, how do you feel about that? Do you think you're gonna add more flexibility to the game and stuff like that?
You know, look, people ask for stuff all the time, and we evaluate and figure out, you know, well, look, we can't do everything, so we try to figure out, well, what's going to make the most people happy, and then we think about what's reasonable, right? I mean, some people ask for some things, you go, that we're never doing that. And then there are some things that, you know, oh, that's not the difficult change, we should just do that. And then there's some, but everything else is in between, which is, you know, if it makes you know, we only have so many programming resources, and so it takes time and money to do a change. So it's like, well, let's pick the things that are gonna make the most people happy. I personally put a preference on things that make it better for the newbies, because that's how you keep the, you know, game alive, right? We have to keep having new customers, or, you know, because some people go on a hiatus or something, or they or worse. Hopefully, yeah, I'd say the thing that makes it hardest that I hate the most is, you know, somebody in the community dies, it always, especially if it's someone I've had interactions with, it gets me, and makes me sad. So anyway, we have to keep having new customers. So, you know, ways that make it easier for them is important. So prioritize things that, like, you know, how much it's going to cost and what's the benefit, and does it make sense? And I do read that Sim Santa list every year, and we try to get as many things in there as we can, you know, if we can possibly do it.
The Sim Santa list? What's that?
Something on the message board.
It gets on the general board every year.
Yeah.
Somebody posts it every year, and then people just list the features they would like. And I always used to put, I want the audio, but I don't know anymore, man.
I miss
it's not as good as I had hoped, you know? Like, I always thought of it like just listening to a game, but it's hard. It takes a long time.
No, it's fantastic.
Well, Tyler, I'd like to get at another time. I'd like to get your input on that issue, because I bet you might have some.
Can we have just a minute to really thank Dayne for making all this possible?
Yeah, that's what I was going to do.
You'll get so much fun out of it.
Show. Thanks for stealing my outro, David. That's totally what I was going to do. I was thinking about it, and I wanted to, we've lost Baud, by the way. The phone might have died. He dropped out. But so thanks, Baud, for being on the show. But Dayne, seriously, thanks to you and your whole team, for all the hard work you guys do. Go Wolverines. Seriously, Charles, Tom, all those guys you mentioned all the time, you give all the credit where credit is due, and we wouldn't be here talking about it right now for what all the hard work you guys do. And thanks for being on the show once again.
Oh, my pleasure.
You have an open roundtable invite at any time.
All right. Well, you guys got we put you in the newsletter, so
yes, you did.
Thanks,
and thanks for doing that.
Thousands of people now following.
Yeah. We picked up a few new subscribers.
You did a great job. You did a great job. Thanks. Well, you're welcome. Thanks for being customers. I hope you continue to enjoy the game for years. And I will keep going as long as we've got a community and it's financially continues to be viable. We will keep it going. It's like I said. Nobody's making a lot of money on it, where it's a passion project, but it makes enough money to keep it going, and we keep reinvesting in it. And I still like playing it. So it's I don't have much time to play as I'd like, but I do it partly because I like playing it, but also to keeps me in touch, right? With you guys say, hey, you should change this. Well, then I can check it out, or so keeps me in touch with all of you as well. So I enjoy it. I love the community, and thank all you guys for your participation and for doing this podcast, because I think it's pretty cool. I think you've caught on to something and people like watching it.
Well, appreciate that. And Turnbuckle. Well, before we go, let's go ahead and bring Baud back. Baud is back.
Reincarnated.
For the end of the show.
I don't know what happened. My computer just died with
But thanks again. That's all right. You're back for the end. So for everybody, thanks to another roundtable in the books. This was a great one. More to come. And this has been Turnbuckle Bros, the roundtable, for all of the guys, and for Dayne. We will bid you adios.
Turnbuckle Brothers, man.